Welcome, Mr. Matthews.
It's a pleasure to be here, Atarah.
So besides being our school principal at Hebron Christian College, you have a very interesting hobby, beekeeping.
Yes, I find beekeeping a very enjoyable and relaxing hobby. After my hard work at school, I really enjoy spending time with the bees.
So when did you start beekeeping?
I started beekeeping when I was 13 years old. Now that was a long time ago, and I was only a young boy. My father told me a little bit about bees, and I was so interested, I started reading books and encyclopedias about beekeeping. And I said to him, I want to start beekeeping. So we found a beehive being advertised in the paper, and we went out and bought it, and thereafter I started my beekeeping hobby.
If someone is interested in becoming a beekeeper, what do they need to do?
To become a beekeeper, Atarah, one does need to do a little bit of research and reading, and preferably get in touch with another beekeeper who's already been doing that hobby, because there is quite a little bit to learn. As fascinating as bees are, you do need to know how to prepare the equipment, do queen rearing, provide space for the bees to put their honey in. So it does require some knowledge. And if you do the hobby without knowledge, you might come unstuck. So it is certainly best, like I did when I was young. I didn't know a beekeeper, but I bought a book and I read lots of things about beekeeping. So it does require a bit of study and talking and learning, but once you've got the basics, you can get underway without help from other people.
Many people are afraid of bees. Have you been stung?
Yes, I have been stung, and stung many times, Atarah. But you don't need to be afraid of bees, because bees only sting you when you're hurting them or squashing them. Most people get stung when they stand on a bee and the bee's about to die. So the bee's letting that person know, get off, take your foot off me. I occasionally get stung, but very infrequently these days, because I've learnt to handle the bees very calmly. I know what angers them and what keeps them peaceful, and they also sense that I am confident in handling them. So I can go for weeks and weeks and weeks without receiving one sting. And occasionally I'll squeeze a bee accidentally and it'll sting me. So it is a hobby where there's a little bit of pain now and then with the bee stings, but not very often.
If people come into contact with bees, what can they do to avoid being stung?
The best thing to do, Atarah, is to remain still and calm. Bees will not sting people if they're just going around about their normal business. But if they flap their arms and scream and get excited, that will agitate the bees. So, as I said before, stay calm and the bee will usually fly away.
Do bees suffer from any diseases?
Yes, they do, Atarah. There's a number of diseases we have in New Zealand that harms bees, and when they catch it, it usually causes the hive to die out. We don't have many diseases that there are in other countries, and that's why you're not allowed to bring bees into New Zealand, or even honey, which would bring that disease into our country. But recently, 6 or so years ago, a little mite was brought into our country called Varroa, and that has been very bad for the beekeeping industry. This little mite eats away at the baby bees and lives on the adult bees, and it causes the hive to die. So we have to now treat our beehives with a type of insecticide to kill the mite and keep the hive alive. So it's very important as a beekeeper to identify these diseases if they come into your hive, treat them, and make sure you don't get any more diseases. And it's so important for people coming into the country not to bring honey, and certainly not to bring live bees into our country that could bring those diseases.
Bees are very fascinating creatures. What are some of the things that we can learn from them?
You are right, Atarah. They are very fascinating creatures. And that's why I love beekeeping, because every time I look inside a beehive, I see the wonder of nature. the way in which the bee is designed, with its wings that can carry a load, yet it can fold up its wings to enter a small cell and store the honey in the cell. Even the honeycomb cell is just amazing. As you know, it's a hexagonal shape, and it fits back to back with the cell on the other side of the frame. Scientists have looked at the shape of the bee cell, and they've tried to work out a better one that uses less material, is stronger, and can store more honey. And did they find a better shape? No, the honeybee had the right shape. Honeybees society is quite amazing, with the queen being the egg layer, the worker bee literally working very hard, and we can learn a lot from the term busy bee. Bees just never stop working. They even work at night time, only sleep for a short time, and then they work. So it teaches us that we should work hard, we should be busy people. Also, the drones, being the male, their only job is to fertilize the queen so we can have more babies in the hive, and the hive can grow, reproduce itself, and we can have more honeybees. So it's quite amazing. I see the honey colony and the way it's structured as just an example of the wonderful creative ability of God. It's just amazing how these bees can work together, produce a product in the form of honey and propolis and pollen, and do such good in nature with all their various jobs and ways of going about things. So it is certainly fascinating, and I just love beekeeping.
You have some really interesting things to show us. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yes, Atarah, I've brought some equipment, an empty beehive, and some of the tools of the trade, and we'll go outside and have a look at them, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay, Atarah, let's have a look at a beehive, shall we?
Yeah.
This is what we call a beehive. It's one story, but they do get higher. But let's have a look at a one-story beehive. First of all, we have the lid. The lid keeps the rain off the beehives. It's just going to be pulled off, put back on again. And then we have the hive mat here. Now with the hive mat, it stops the bees sticking their honeycomb to the roof. So when that's pulled off, it can expose the frames. And then we have what we call the box, and below the box is the floorboard. And the bees can come in and out of here like that and go up into their comb. Now the box is made up of what we call frames, and the frames are pieces of wood like that joined together, and we encourage the bees to build their honeycomb in the middle of the wood. If that doesn't happen, then you can't pull the combs out because the comb might be going that way. But by making the bees build their honeycomb inside the wood, we call these removable frames. And we can pull them out, and we can look at the bees storing their honey. We can look at the baby bees, check that they've got diseases or not. Lately, they've now brought those flames out in plastic. So this is now plastic, all joined together, and they last a lot longer. So we then put the bees into there and let them expand. And once they fill up the whole box, we put another box on top, and they move up into that, put another box on top of that. We also have a device called a queen excluder. Oh, the bees, no, don't stand still, remember.
Oh.
We put that on top of the box like that, and that stops the queen going up into the second box. She stays in the bottom box and does all her egg laying down there. So that's usually put on the top of the first box, and then we put a honey box on here. In beekeeping, we use a smoker. We blow the smoke like that. Well, that's not smoke, but it's just ash over the beehive, and that stops the bees from coming up. They don't like the smoke, so they move away from it, and it keeps them calm. I also have a veil when the bees get, when I'm taking their honey off particularly, and they don't like to have their honey taken away, I can put that over my head and it stops the bees stinging my face. Also, we have gloves that we can put on, and these gloves stop the bees stinging us keep our hands from getting stung. And the last thing is what we call a hive tool. The bees always stick everything together with a substance called propolis. And so by putting that there and going, it breaks the joint and we can lift the comb off. So that's what we call a beehive. It's all in a form that can be pulled apart very easy. It keeps the bees nice and dry, protects them, and we can add on more equipment as they need it. Atarah, we have a little bit of honey here. See, the bees put a little cap on the honey to seal it and keep it airtight. So we scrape away the honey like that. Try putting your finger in there and have a lick.
Very nice.
Nice. That's how bees store their honey.
I've tasted some of your honey and it is delicious. But besides being tasty, honey can be healthy and useful. Can you tell us more about this?
Yes, certainly honey is yummy and very tasty, but it is an amazing food. It is made up of many different compounds and minerals, and these all work together to provide health for our body. In fact, the major component of honey is a sugar called glucose, and it's not like the sugar they put in processed food these days and soft drinks, which we're told not to drink too much of because it's bad for our body. The sugar type in honey is very easily digested by our bodies. It doesn't cause tooth decay, and it is very good for all that we need for our bodies. In fact, honey is so good that germs cannot live in it. And that's why today they even apply honey to wounds. They say it is so good in healing things like burns, people who have suffered bad burns. I know that in reading the Bible says, eat honey for it is good for you. We even know of people who have lived just on honey and have stayed very healthy and well. So I encourage my friends and relatives and my children and family to eat lots of honey, because it doesn't cause tooth decay, it doesn't cause bad things in the body, but it is a very healthy food.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews, for coming along. We really enjoyed you.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you, Atarah. I enjoy talking about bees.
If you want more information on bees, visit our website learningforlife.co.nz.